Today I'm going to go over with you NATA's position statement on fluid replacement for athletes. Obviously, we know that dehydration is something that athletes and athletic trainers, of course, coaches and parents, basically anybody involved in athletics in any sort of capacity, has to deal with on basically like a daily basis. So NATA's come together and they've put together this position statement to help athletic trainers understand how to deal with dehydration, how to prevent it within that, prevent any heat illness or anything like that as well. So basically, of course, the best way to prevent dehydration is to start off hydrated. So they recommend that athletes consume between 17 and 20 fluid ounces of whether it be water or sports drink or what have you, 2 to 3 hours prior to, and then after that, another 7 to 10 ounces about 10 to 20 minutes before the activity begins. And that'll help the athlete to be properly hydrated prior to going into an event. During activity, NATA also recommends that athletes ingest another 7 to 10 fluid ounces of beverage, basically every 10 to 20 minutes. Post-event rehydration should be approximately 25 to 50% more fluid than what they lost, and that should be completed within about 2 hours in order to properly rehydrate. And there are several methods of measuring proper hydration. One of them is to take baseline body weight and then to measure their body weight again during and after activity to determine how much fluid they've lost and how much they need to replace. The most accurate way is to use a refractometer to measure urine-specific gravity. The easiest way, though, aside from just taking body weight measurements, is to use a sample urine color chart. That'll give you sort of a pretty good idea of how well hydrated the athlete is. Another important part of developing and implementing a hydration protocol is to take into account the sport, environmental conditions, as well as sweat rates. So the protocol is going to consider each sport's unique features. So each sport's going to be different, and they're going to have different intensities, different rates of play, different opportunities to be able to hydrate, and those things all need to be taken into consideration for each individual sport in order to provide them with the best possible hydration protocols. Another way to help keep athletes hydrated is really that beverages should be easily accessible and they should be in individual containers. Another thing that can influence the amount of fluid that's consumed is the temperature of the fluid. The most effective method, of course, of preventing dehydration is proper education for athletes, parents, and coaches. They should have enough knowledge to enable them to recognize the signs and the symptoms of dehydration, and then from there to be able to properly diagnose it and treat it. So the symptoms, of course, are going to include thirst, irritability, general discomfort, headache, weakness, dizziness, cramps, chills, vomiting, head and neck heat sensations, decreased performance. Fluid loss of only 1 to 2% of an athlete's body weight can impair performance and physiological functions as well. Dehydration of 3 or more percent will cause increased impairment and can lead to heat illness. So we want to be able to avoid those. So to treat dehydration properly, if your athlete is conscious, isn't having any mental or GI impairments, then you can go ahead with an oral rehydration protocol. So basically, if your athlete is dealing with severe dehydration or heat illness, if they're unconscious, if they are mentally impaired, if they're having some gastric issues and aren't able to ingest fluids, then they need to be transported to the nearest medical facility so that they can receive proper care and be rehydrated with intravenous fluids. Another consideration for fluid replacement is to include sodium and other electrolytes in the athlete's hydration beverages. So these are especially important if the athlete has missed a meal or doesn't have access to food, because if the activity exceeds 4 hours, they definitely are going to need some electrolyte replacement. And also if they're not acclimatized to hot weather. Another thing to take into consideration is the sweat rates, either of the team, like in general, or of individual athletes. It might be difficult to take those for individual athletes, but there are charts that can give you um, the typical sweat rate of athletes within a given sport. That can help to make sure that the proper fluids are included in your protocol for that sport. Sports camps, tournaments, things like that. They're going to require advanced planning um, and really nail down hydration protocol. So for things like that, you're going to obviously want to plan well ahead. Check the wet globe bulb temperatures for the time of your event. And then if need be, get help from other athletic trainers. Come help you out with your event to make sure that there's enough coverage. It's really the only update that I found to NATA's position statement is the American College of Sports Medicine's position stand on exercise and fluid replacement, which was released in 2007. They emphasized more taking more body weight measurements to make sure that the athletes are staying hydrated. They also made a distinction between heat stress and cold stress, and note that in cold stress conditions, even dehydration levels of 3 to 5% are unlikely to impair athletic performance. But it's encouraging if even at those dehydration levels that it's not likely to impair athletic performance, so it's probably not impairing any physiological function as well. In contrast to NATA's belief that hyperhydration might assist with thermoregulation, ACSM's position is that it doesn't in fact help with that. Though it may help delay dehydration, but it's not going to do anything really for thermoregulation. And that's really it. The other articles that I found basically reference either NATA or ACSM's position statements or both.